Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Doc Talk. I'm your host, Erick Mian. In this podcast, we have conversations with physicians, with leaders, institutional leaders, to discuss professional experiences and their areas of interest. We sincerely hope that our listeners will find value in this podcast and that it will facilitate professional growth, be a source of inspiration, and yes, yet another venue for us to connect professionally and grow collectively. So today's podcast is specifically focused on physician well-being and burnout, and I am delighted and honored to welcome my guest, who is Professor of Psychiatry, Associate Dean for Faculty Affairs, Editor-in-Chief for an online journal, Medicine and Meaning, Dr. Erick Messias. Welcome to the Doc Talk.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for the invitation, the opportunity to connect with a broader community of physicians.
So Erick, as a clinical psychiatrist, you obviously treat patients with various types of mental illnesses. And I watched your recent TED Talk. It was a very moving story. And clearly you're passionate about physician well-being and their development. So what got you interested in physician well-being, and why is this important?
Well, there is a tragic story that people can hear details on the TEDx story, which is the loss of a colleague to suicide, a colleague in healthcare, in the clinic where I was the medical director. And that was the negative, tragic story that got me interested in professional well-being in particular. But in general, the idea of well-being the idea of understanding well-being came to me actually from a patient question. A patient of mine who I was treating for depression got better from his depression. And since he got better, he asked me, so now what do I do with my life? And I knew what he should not do,
yes,
but I didn't know what he should do. And the quest to answer that question on what should we do with our lives got me interested not only in professional well-being, but in well-being in general.
We doctors are, you've seen it, I'm sure you've seen it as well. We doctors are notorious for not taking care of ourselves, and because of maybe work overload, maybe our collective personality traits, the traditional culture of silence that we have seen, or maybe it's just a sense of overconfidence on our part, the quote and unquote, it can't happen to me syndrome. So the question is, amongst physicians, how prevalent is this syndrome, and why do many of us continue to deny it?
So the data on professional well-being is quite strong. So there are several national surveys that shows that close to 50% of physicians show signs of well-being, of burnout.
Right.
So burnout is a combination of inefficiency, a sense of inefficiency, exhaustion, and cynicism.
Right.
So these three combinations, about half of the physicians in the United States today show one of those three.
Wow. Okay. So that is obviously then very, very prevalent.
Yes, and it's very prevalent, and it is associated with medical errors. It is associated with working part-time, early retirement, is associated with changing jobs more often than should be done. It's associated with decreased patient satisfaction scores. So burnout has a huge impact not only on the physicians and the workforce, on the healthcare professional, but also on patients and in the healthcare system in general.
Right. So obviously the loss of productivity and obviously loss of quality for patient care. So why do you think we just don't pay attention, or we maybe deny it or overlook it?
Well, we are facing a sort of a perfect storm, right? On one side, you have a group of highly dedicated professionals that were selected because they're very hardworking, they're very dedicated. So this is the selection process that creates physicians, right? We're trained to be devoted to our work and to our profession. That's the one combination. The second combination is the increased digitalization of health. And by that, I mean the changes in technology that have been affecting all of us. There is data to show that electronic medical records, for example, have added hours to the physician workload without giving them the sense of efficiency that was promised to us 2 decades ago when we started implementing this. And the third component has to do with the increased demand of the 24-hour society that we live in. So now not only we have to be 24/7 physicians, but we have to be 24/7 parents, 24/7 spouses. We have 24/7 engagement with society. So that gives everyone a sense of profound exhaustion and fatigue of being engaged all the time.
So I can certainly attest for the EMR. I mean, I personally see it all the time. It adds up to our workload, and at the end of the day, we're looking at notes. And I got on service just recently. I'm still finishing up the notes and everything. So that definitely adds up in the workload. So let's talk about within the realm of the well-being and burnout show. So I mean, sure, it's our individual obligation to take care of ourselves, no question about it. And I mean, I think it's also our collective responsibility as well to watch out for others around us. I mean, our colleagues at workplace. And there's also a ton of data, literature on burnout and physician burnout. So from your perspective, what are the top 3 causes of physician burnout that we particularly need to be aware of?
The first one is the increased overload of responsibilities at work. So physicians, they have a hard time letting off, right? So think about, you were a physician 50 years ago. You would close your practice at 5 p.m. You would close that door, you go home. Today, electronic medical records will send you notifications if a patient calls, if there is an abnormal lab. So you're never really off. The second is a culture of not taking vacation. There is a culture in medicine in which physicians and healthcare professionals in general feel pressure to work full time all the time.
Right.
The third major cause is the technology change, and the fact that we live in a world where you basically have in your pocket not only the charts of every single patient you've seen, but every single patient that your institution has treated.
Oh, yes.
So you're carrying all those charts with you all the time. We have to find a way to let that go. And nobody has found that solution yet.
Yeah, and that's always a hard thing to, we're always on call, quote and unquote, and always sort of fixated on what's going on with the labs, have they come back, and what the results are, and what my obligation is as a physician. Do I need to reach out now, or should I wait till tomorrow, and all those things?
Right, so there are changes in the way physicians work that have been very disruptive to the physician's brain and to the physician's heart, if we think about well-being.
Now, that's important because obviously if we're on call and we're so exhausted, then obviously it's going to impair our productivity and our efficiency the next day, right?
Yes, and there is data to show that's the case.
Right. So let's talk about the personality traits. I mean, we were talking about earlier just our inability to let it go and our compulsion to be perfect. So the personality traits that protects a person from emotional exhaustion and burnout. So if I could request you to put on the clinical psychiatrist hat on, so that these obviously, these are the traits that predispose us, but what are the protective personality traits that we could probably leverage that are in our biology to fight professional burnout?
The number one trait I would like to call attention to is our ability to work with each other, which is the idea that we can delegate. We can delegate if you have a nurse that you trust, if you have a physician assistant that you trust. That's the most important person for you to have in your team. So the ability to work in teams is what made us a successful species in this planet, and we have to remember that.
So
and
true.
Not take everything upon ourselves,
right.
but to take as a team. And that's going to be the healthcare of the future has to be around teams.
Right. Everybody shares a burden.
Yes,
and
everybody has different responsibilities, and there is trust. The most important thing in a team is that you trust your teammate. You trust that they're going to be there for you, that they're going to give you accurate information and timely information. And the key ingredient for team is trust. on each other.
So the team, delegation, and then trust, right?
Yes.
Those are the three things. All right. So, obviously enough of this, the burnout. So let's sort of cap it off with on a larger collective level. If you could briefly talk about, what are the institutional support systems, for example, within UMS that are available to help us fight burnout and to get through tough times should somebody need them.
So we have, here at UMS and in most healthcare institutions now in the United States, there are strong programs for employee assistance programs. They usually include benefits of psychotherapists, so you can access a psychotherapist at no cost and for a limited time, but that's very helpful. I am a big proponent of psychotherapy, and I believe that it helps people quite a lot. If people need the next level of care here at UMS, and by that next level I mean medication, which is done usually by psychiatrists, we do have a psychiatrist available for all faculty members, for all physicians, and that psychiatrist is available at no cost to all physicians at UMS. We also have programs of mindfulness that people can attune to.
Right.
We know we have here at ACH, we have Pele, who is one of the champions for mindfulness. And at UMS, we have Puru Thapa, who is also a champion for mindfulness. And his whole team is giving mindfulness classes for everybody. Finally, my office, the Office of Faculty Affairs, is here to support physicians. And I'm creating a coaching program for physicians. Coaching is not so much for the personal mental health aspects of life, but coaching is more for the flourishing, kind of personal growth side of life. And I am a certified coach, and we have two other certified coaches at UMS that physicians can have access to through our College of Medicine Faculty Affairs office. So we also commend Arkansas Children's Hospital for having a leadership training program that is available to physicians working at Children's. And that program is actually a model of a program that I plan to implement at UMS.
Well, that's very nice.
So I think both our institutions should learn from each other.
And all these services are free of cost, and they are confidential, right? They are totally confidential.
Absolutely. So I can, and I have to wear different hats as part of my job, but I can talk to any physicians as the Associate Dean for Faculty Affairs in the college, but I'm also available as a executive coach, which is something I want to make sure people know about. And I have worked with several faculty members, both at Children's and at UMS, and I'm very proud of the work that each one of them has done with that type of support.
So coaching is obviously very important to grow and to thrive, right?
Yes.
That's and professional
Yes, and there's actually data from the Mayo Clinic. The Mayo Clinic did actually a randomized control trial of coaching versus no coaching and on burnout. And it showed that those people that had 6 sessions of executive coaching at 6 months, they showed less burnout than those that did not. So there is data to show that executive coaching can help professional burnout in healthcare.
I think this is something I actually did not know about it, but this is definitely something I'm going to look into.
We are slowly launching the program. So I completed my training through the University of Texas at Dallas program, which is one of the nationally recognized executive coaching programs.
Right.
And we have 2 other people that are certified as well.
Right. So in this, I as much as I wanted to stay away from COVID and the stress and everything, I mean, this must be something that people can probably even utilize and explore should there be a need.
Yes, and a lot of coaching can be done as much as mental health actually these days through tele. So we do sessions, using Zoom or using, any type of video technology.
Right. No, that's great. All right. So shifting gears slightly. Let's talk about positive psychiatry. So I'm an oncologist, so forgive my ignorance, but I had always thought that positive psychiatry is just a fancy name for positive reinforcement. But now I understand it's a lot more than that. So could you talk about positive psychiatry and how is it used to fight emotional exhaustion?
Of course. So positive psychiatry is a development that is fairly recent. So it officially started in 2013, which is actually about 15 years later than psychology. So psychology started a positive psychology movement in 1998. The movement is basically an idea that, okay, we have studied for 150 years negative emotions.
Right,
so I
right.
can talk to you about depression and anxiety and addiction and compulsions and obsessions and delusions
Sure.
all day long, because that's what we've been doing for 150 years. So in the last few years, we have decided to study not only those negative emotions, but also what makes life worth living and what are positive emotions and how can we enhance well-being and even happiness.
Right.
So positive psychology and positive psychiatry study that. And there are several interventions that have been shown to help with that. One of
Right.
them is using your strengths, your character strengths, using your natural abilities. Gratitude is one of them. Physical exercise, diet. So there are a lot of things that we have done as physicians to understand good physical health that now we know helps good mental health as well.
Right. Now, that's really good information, and I certainly did not know
Yes.
much about it. No, that's definitely great. So let's change gears a bit, and let's talk about culture. So the professional development and well-being and thriving is tied to quite an extent to institutional culture, a culture that is to an extent defined by the fabric of its people, that affects our work, that determines our individual and collective destiny to an extent. So from a philosophical standpoint, why do you think it is imperative for leadership to define and maintain an institutional culture that sticks to its core values?
So culture is the way we live and the way we operate on a day-to-day basis. And culture defines what's normal, what's expected, and by doing so, also defines what's abnormal and what you should not be doing.
So true, yeah.
So physicians are part of the larger healthcare culture, which in the United States, it's based on, for good and bad, on revenue. We need to have a sustainable business model. It's also based on a very, very regulated industry. The healthcare industry is the second most regulated industry in the United States. The first being nuclear energy. so after nuclear energy, we are the top regulated energy industry in the United States. So we ought to be understanding what that does to us. And what it does to us is it creates a culture that can be very hierarchical. It's a culture that can be very demanding. It's a culture that can be actually very unforgiving. So let's think about those three elements. We need to look at the future and think, is this sustainable? When we think about the new generation that is growing up online and is growing up with free access to lots of tools in technology, they may not be attracted to a culture that is highly regulated, that is hierarchical, and that's unforgiving. So we need to change that. And the one way that I push people to change that, it has to come from leadership. If you look at every single model on addressing burnout, be there the Mayo Clinic model, the IHI model, the Cleveland Clinic model, the Stanford model, they all include leadership. They all have leadership has a role to play. And what's that role? The role of leadership is to reshape that culture and create new norms. And the norms will be, hopefully, fight some of these excessive regulations that we have. Number two is going to be more forgiving, in that we understand that we make mistakes and that we are going to learn from these mistakes. We don't have to hide them. We're going to have to learn from them. And the other one is that it's not going to be as hierarchical as it has been for many years. Another example is that the culture of healthcare is a culture of full-time work. And I believe we are about to face a new generation that is going to grow up saying, if I don't have to work full-time, why should I work full-time? So we are going to have a challenge there. If our culture is that everybody works full-time, and I have experience of this when I was a medical director of a clinic, The part-time physicians were the hardest one for me because as the medical director, I was there all the time, and I had to cover their prescriptions and their patients' issues all when they're not there. But we're going to have to adapt to that. I understand now as a leader that some people prefer not to work full-time, and we're going to have to adapt to that. We cannot wait for them to decide, I'm going to work full-time until I retire. That's not going to happen. Right. This new generation has a different mindset, and they're much more for quality of life than our generation was. We were trained to work full-time. It's about to change.
And then obviously digital health and connectivity, those add up a new dimension to the culture itself, right?
Yes, which is going to be mobility, right? So what we're going to see in the next few years is physicians working all over the world. And it could be that, you could, if you're a radiologist, you could be working in Paris, France, and seeing films in Arkansas, Paris, Arkansas.
And vice versa. So, all right, no, that's definitely very enlightening. So, in the end, I want to talk about your publication. So, the Medicine and Meaning, which has writings and photography from UMS faculty primarily. And my recent favorite, I got to say that, my recent favorite is the Pantheon, where our colleague Caesarea used long exposure photography with the title, quote, "Generations Changing While Pantheon Stands Tall, Witnessing History, Rise and Fall of Kingdoms and the Changing Times." So we doctors live and breathe science and data. And why do you think art and imagination is equally important and is actually good for the souls of those who are driven by science?
Yes, it's because there are limits to science.
So true.
We need to understand that there are things in this world that we cannot understand or measure in a scientific way. And we should not lose that.
Right.
Walter Benjamin, once, it's a German thinker, he complained that we live in the disenchanted age because we lost the idea of believing in different things that we may or may not exist. So to me, we created Medicine and Meaning to reconnect to that aspect of our existence, the more creative aspect, the aspect that imagine things, the aspect that that can look for, so the poets, they look for ways of expressing emotions and expressing experiences in unique ways with, different music to it. The people the imaging people, they are incredible. I mean, they bring us new ways of looking at things. We need to, the world of science can be very limiting.
Right.
And I believe in science. I am a scientist. I am trained as a scientist. I believe science has given us a lot.
It sure has.
For example, if you think about the Pantheon, right?
Yeah.
The Pantheon was built. I believe the one that is standing there was built by Hadrian about the year, the first century,
Right.
about the 150 or so. So that's about 2,000 years old, give or take a couple of centuries. Right. It's that building itself is built with good architecture and engineering.
It is amazing.
But
Yes,
but
I've seen
to
it.
be able to contemplate the mystery of the universe, what's left after you measure everything? What's left is us, our lives, our experience, our first-person account of what is it like to be alive in the universe today. And that's very unique. That's never going to repeat itself.
Right.
It's a unique experience.
No, I mean, I definitely enjoy. My favorite one is photography. I absolutely love that section. So this has been a very, very enlightening conversation, Dr. Messias. Thank you so very much for your time today. I also want to thank our listeners for tuning in. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe. We believe you will find value in this podcast. And if you've already subscribed, thank you. May I also ask you to consider sharing with your friends and colleagues, maybe even on social media, as we connect socially with a mask on and 6 feet apart. Until we meet again next time, stay well, stay safe.